I was born in Egypt, but I am not an Egyptian. I was born enslaved, but I am not a slave. I was born in poverty, but now am part of a community of the covenant, surrounded by a community of faith. I was born unknown, but now I am known as a prophet for my people. There is no record of my speaking until the record of the song of Miriam, which is the oldest part of our faith story ever recorded. I was first a nameless sister, but now I'm remembered by my own name. My name is Miriam, which has several meanings. For some it means salty or bitter water, but I think of it as tears, the tears of sorrow for my people born in bitter enslavement. For others it means beautiful or beloved, and I think of myself as beloved of my people and my God. It is the name of nobility, and in the future, I believe my people will continue to name their daughters Miriam or Mary in memory of me. My mother and my father were of the tribe of Levi. Levites, we were called. The Levites were raised to assist the priests in the worship of our God, Jehovah, Yahweh, especially to sing songs and psalms. And thus my famous song, still recalled today, is a true part of my heritage. Fear was my daily companion when I was a child. Fear each day when my father left with the press gang to work on the building projects of the Pharaoh. Fear each day when I went to the small garden behind our house, hoping to find enough for us to eat. And the greatest fear of all, when my brother was born. For you see, the enslaver, Pharaoh, had decreed that our midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, were to kill any boys that were born to our people, kill them as they came out of the womb. When my mother became pregnant, we were not sure how to pray, how to hope. But then we heard that our midwives were wise. They told the overseers that our women were so vigorous and strong, unlike the women of Egypt, that they gave birth without assistance. And the midwives were called only after the babies were born, too late to strangle them as they came from the water of the womb. But the Pharaoh was still determined to commit infanticide and decreed that all boys born to enslaved women would be drowned in the waters of the Nile. Only girls were allowed to live. So when the day came and my mother gave birth, we decided to fool our oppressors by obeying this terrible decree, but on our own terms. Mother and I made a basket of reeds, the same reeds to make large boats, and lined it with waterproof bitumen, a kind of tar, and pitch from local plants. I found a heavy piece of cloth, and we swaddled my baby brother and put him in the basket with a woven lid to keep the sun away. Mother gave me one of the most important jobs of my life. She put the basket in the reeds alongside the river, and it was my job to pretend to play or gather reeds, and at the same time keeping an eye on my brother. I had to take the basket back home every few hours so she could nurse, but all in all, he slept a lot of the time, and we were both safe. But then, The day came when I saw a crowd coming toward the area of the reeds where my baby brother was hidden. I wasn't sure what to do, and I thought it best just to hide and hope they would go by. But they began to linger and set up what looked like some tents and brought out some food from baskets. And before long, another group of women approached, and I saw a noblewoman at the head of the group, and I heard them say, "Here she comes, let's get everything ready." And I continued to hide and listen, and soon found out that the company was from the palace and that the woman was the daughter of Pharaoh. As I watched, some of the women began to wade through the reeds, coming closer to the basket. My fear grew when one of them spotted the basket and ran back to her mistress, pointing toward the reeds. I was truly terrified when they told the noblewoman to tell her servants to bring her the basket. They were a bit rough when they lifted the basket, and my brother woke up and began to cry, and I crept closer, planning to run in and grab him away if possible, as I truly thought she would order him to be drowned. But God, Yahweh, is good. And much to my surprise, once the lid was lifted, the princess lifted my brother out and cradled him in her arms. She took pity on him, and I seized my chance. I stepped on the reeds and I walked near. Since all the attention was on my brother, I was able to come within listening distance, and to my surprise, I heard her say, "This is one of the Hebrew babies." I mustered all my courage and spoke up, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" "Yes, go," she answered. So I turned and ran home as fast as I could. My mother was startled to see me coming without the basket, but I told her what had happened. Immediately, she left the house and we hurried back to the riverbank. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." So my mother took the baby in her arms and nursed him. The princess allowed my mother to take my baby brother home each night and bring him back to the palace each day for a visit with the princess. While our fear was less, we were never able to trust that somehow the princess might tire of him, or she'd decide that he was not worthy of her love as he had been born enslaved. We had heard of other cases where young children had been taken from their homes and raised in wealthy households to be servants of the family. I worried every day, knowing that most Egyptians considered us to be not quite human, something maybe a little more intelligent than a cow or a lamb, but certainly made separate, both by our birth and by our religion. I knew, of course, that we were separate from the Egyptians, but not in the way they thought. My mother and father had told me stories of our heritage, how we entered the land of Egypt as a free people, coming at the invitation of Joseph, one of the sons of Jacob, to live during a time of famine. The 7 years of famine extended our stay, and our ancestors continued to live under the protection of Joseph, who had been chosen by God to save many generations. Life in Egypt was good, and our people had many children, and our numbers grew. It seemed that the prophecy that the descendants of Abraham would be as numerous as the stars in the sky or the sands in the desert was coming true. The land of Goshen was a place of safety and plenty. But as time went on, memories of Joseph faded among the Egyptians, and a new Pharaoh came to the throne who did not remember him. Many generations and 400 years of planting and growth and harvest and reaping had come and gone. The new Pharaoh was Ramses, son of Ramses. He moved the capital out of Thebes, located several hundred days' journey south in the Nile, and floated the riches of the empire to an area nearer the seagoing ships and trade along the great waters of the north. This brought him near to Goshen on the eastern side of his new capital and brought us within his gaze. "Look," he said to his people, "the Israelites have become far too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous, and if war breaks out, we'll join our enemies and fight against us and leave the country." So they put slave masters over us to oppress us with forced labor, and we built Pithom and Ramses as store cities for Pharaoh. But the more we were oppressed, the more we multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread us and worked us ruthlessly. They made our lives bitter with harsh labor in brick and mortar and with all kinds of work in the fields, and all their harsh labor the Egyptians worked us ruthlessly. So you can see why I was so afraid when the daughter of Pharaoh discovered my brother in his waterborne basket, and why my family and I continue to live in fear every day. But then a special day came that gave me hope. The princess told my mother that she was declaring a name day for my brother. It seemed that he was now old enough, since he had been weaned, and that the princess wanted to adopt him as her own child. We realized that this would limit our contact with him, but we hoped that as he grew up, he might not forget his birth and his heritage, and would come to know the one true God, Jehovah, Yahweh. I was allowed to be with my mother on that day when she handed him over into the arms of the daughter of Pharaoh, and I listened as the princess named him Moses, saying, "I drew him out of the water." For that is what Moses means, the son that was drawn out. For me, looking back on that day, I never suspected that the name of Moses was a prophecy from God. Moses had not just been drawn out of the waters of the Nile, but he was drawn out by his people, the people of Israel, and he was drawn out by God to do a great work to save our people. Many years went by before I saw my brother again. I only heard about what had happened when Moses, years later, told me that he also feared for his life. It seemed that while he was young, he assumed that he was Egyptian by birth. He was brought up in the palace with every conceivable advantage. But at some point, he realized he was different. Perhaps the sons of the king taunted him. Perhaps his adopted mother told him something. Or maybe, just maybe, he had a vague memory of a mother, a father, a sister, and soon a brother who loved him. In any case, he grew into the knowledge that he was of our race, an Israelite by birth, one of the people of the covenant, descended from our ancestors Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob, Leah, and Rachel. He observed that the status of his people, their enforced labor and the mistreatment at the hands of their Egyptian overseers, and one day something inside of him snapped. He observed an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, and he felt a surge of kinship, not with the Egyptian overlord, but with the Israelite. Enraged, he intervened, and in the process he killed the Egyptian, burying him in the sands of the desert. The next day he returned to the site, and on his way he saw two Hebrews fighting, and he said to the one who'd started the fight, "Why do you strike your fellow Hebrew?" The man said, "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and thought, "What I did must have become known." When Pharaoh heard this, he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh, running into the desert, and came to live in Midian.